All right. So, talking about logistics. Now, who here, when you think of logistics, do you think of great logistics scenarios, or do you think of logistics problems? Typically problems, right? And that's because logistics is very time sensitive and can be very challenging depending upon where you're going, the product, how it's all put together. So what we're going to do today is we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of all the Incoterms and all the detail type stuff on logistics. We don't have time to do that, but I'm going to kind of go over an overview of a plan that will kind of help you see some of how we look at logistics and maybe give you some ideas. And then I would like some good feedback from the audience, because I know we have some really sharp people here, and I'm not the only person that understands this. So would like that kind of feedback as well. Our company, just so you know, we do compliance and logistics. The logistics piece, we specialize in really working with tough logistics. So, emission list items going overseas. And we have a lot of partners that do that. And so we've gained a lot of experience at figuring out how to deal with tricky situations. Today we're going to be talking about logistics, speed, security, timing, and expertise. And what are some winning strategies to help move your freight? Overall, we're going to talk about a purpose statement, strategy, timeline, implementation, monitoring, follow-up, and those are the areas we're going to discuss today. I recommend, as you're putting your logistics group together, some of you have one, some of you are building one, some have quite a few people in that group, have a purpose statement. This is an example of a purpose statement that we use. It just kind of sets the tone for you and your team, but it also sets the tone for the people that you're working with. And so when you have an issue or something come up, you can go back to this purpose statement and say, look, here's our goal, right? We're not meeting that goal right now. How are we going to adjust? How are we going to make some changes? How are we going to get there? How do we keep moving in this direction? So anyone out there, has anyone out there developed a purpose statement for your firm that you want to share? Any thoughts on that? Okay. Well, something to think about. Logistics happens so fast and quick, sometimes I think we're reactive and not proactive, and I think that's where some of the challenges come. Strategy. So when we get together with a company to talk about logistics, the first thing I want to know is what are your past challenges? What's gone wrong? What's happened that's caused some headaches for you? Because if we can figure out what those pain areas are, then we can plan ahead and try to alleviate those in the future. Some of those things might be something got confiscated on a foreign port because the documentation wasn't correct, or it went to the wrong port. Or it might be delays, right? Some paperwork didn't get filed on time, or somebody didn't, follow through when they wanted to. I've heard other scenarios where pricing changes in the middle of the logistics. Has anyone experienced that? Where you have a quote here, but then all of a sudden there's all these fees tacked on at the end. So those kinds of things can happen. Any other logistics challenges that anyone's kind of dealt with? Yeah, go ahead.
Customs opening sensitive product.
Okay. Customs opening sensitive product, and then how do you repackage that once customs opens it?
Pretty much destroyed.
Yeah, that's rough. So, figuring out why they needed to open that, right? I'm sure that's kind of what you guys did. Why do they need to open it? What went wrong? How do we fix that in the future? How do we advise them? Is that part of it?
Yep.
Yeah. So these are all real issues. I mean, at the end of the day, this is going to make or break whether you can get your product to your client on time. Legal transfer, and this is something Akana will talk about, our attorney here, in the next one as well, but some of the legal issues. But we look at it from a standpoint of what is your care, custody, and control in that timeline and that transfer of product. So I'll give you an example. We had a gentleman that was shipping some food-grade product to a mill, and then it was shipping to a client, and he was insuring it all the way to the client. But his care, custody, and control stopped at the mill. So when there was a problem, the client didn't want to pay, even though it wasn't his fault, because he was insuring it all the way through. He was, it was kind of a weird deal. The legal ownership transferred to his dock, but he was insuring it all the way through. So we try to match that, whether it's your insurance, when the technical transfers, those are all important things to think about, and it has to do with care, custody, and control. So ideally, my preference is if it's in your care, custody, and control, you handle the insurance and you handle the legal work until it changes. Now, there's some exceptions to that. Depends on the size of the company and some of the deals that you're working. But we try to do that as much as possible. And then choice of freight forwarders. So this gets into looking at whether you have a freight forwarder that's used to shipping challenging products or not. Or maybe not used to shipping in the munitions list world. We use a few different freight forwarders with our firm that have that experience, partly because it's kind of that experiential knowledge of how to get that product over there. You got choice of customs broker. We talked about that a little bit, and choice of customs clearance venue. So there's even some ports that are better at clearing certain types of products than others. When we're dealing with ammunition and firearms, which are tough to ship, right? Some ports are a lot better than that, and when you talk to experienced customs folks, they're going to tell you that. They're going to say, no, we don't want to go through this port, we want to go through this port because they're historically a lot more friendly to this type of product. And some of that experiential knowledge can really save your bacon in the long run. Any thoughts or questions on strategy? I'm sure some of you have some other experience on strategy too and things that you put in, so please speak up if you'd like to. Okay? All right. So timeline. This is always important with a system that has a lot of moving parts, a lot of people involved, and a short period of time needs to get done in, right? So we like to start with the end in mind. So at the end of the day, a lot of this is managing your client expectations, right? So if I'm shipping something to South Africa, I want to manage that expectation with that end client and create buffer in time and buffer in price so that if something changes, then I'm still meeting their expectation. Does that make sense? But secondly, if we start with the end in mind, then we can backtrack through and figure out all the points along the way that can cause hiccups or can cause issues, and then we can manage those. So that's typically how we do it. It seems to work really well. And then as you're going through that process, it's not all about price. And I think this is where a lot of people get hung up on logistics. You got a lot of services in there too. And so it's picking really good partners and figuring out, hey, if something goes wrong, is this partner going to stand up for me, or are they going to slap it to me, right? Are they going to stick it to me with something, either a delay or a price? And so if you can do it this way and you set your strategy up right, then you can hold those folks accountable a little bit. We'll talk about that in a minute. Basically, the things that you're having, the main categories you're having to work on are packaging. So how is your product packaged? What are the weight, box requirements? Is it hazardous material? Do you have to have UN information on there? Do you have to have certain types of packaging for the carrier? So we try to deal with all that up front, so that way it's really clear on the packaging how it needs to be packaged, and it's done according to all the regulatory issues. And that may have been part of the challenge on this other one we were talking about, was just making sure it may not make logical sense, but some of the regulatory issues that you deal with, not just on the U.S. side, but maybe the foreign country side, may change how you package that product. So that's number one, and then documentation is really key. So figuring out, what all the parties are, what all the right wording is on the bill ladings and those types of things, the export filings, so the AES system. So those are all important. And then delivery, and then customs clearance. Customs clearance is kind of important too. But as you kind of map that out, you can see where those different points are in the process of your particular product, and then plan ahead. And that's really, the name of the game if you can with logistics. Sometimes you can't, but a lot of times you can. Any questions on timeline? Anyone have any experiences there they want to share, or suggestions there that they want to add? Because I'd love that. Okay. Implementation. So now it's time to actually implement. And this is where I think most people start, is implementation. You get a call, And it's like, I need this tomorrow. Okay, sure, no problem. Okay, and then now it's implementation, and you really haven't set the stage for a successful logistics scenario. And so you're just hoping it all goes well. And that's where a lot of hiccups come. So by doing all the pre-work, then we can really manage the implementation. It is time sensitive. We like to detail out all the steps in the process and who the decision makers are in those steps, who the contact people are. And, you know, those change. We just had a deal we were working on where, you know, we had somebody go on vacation for a day and a half. Well, now that customs person isn't there, and we got to call somebody else. So knowing who the backups are on those people is also really important. But having those people there, having it kind of mapped out, allows any thoughts there. What kinds of things are we doing more of if we're planning for the worst? Contingencies, yeah. And you're checking more, right? You're kind of checking in, right? So, you know, instead of just letting it go and hoping it works well, it's, hey, where's the shipment at? How's it getting there? Are we on time? What's happening? And that's what a really good logistics provider can help you with, or you guys can kind of do that yourself. It depends on how you're structured. But that's really critical because some of these logistics companies, they're just shipping freight all the time. And some of them are using independents, and some of them are using their own drivers, and some of that. And so it's just really important to have someone kind of quarterbacking that and making sure at each step in the way, everything's moving along. Double check who's on first. We kind of touched on that, but basically assumptions can kind of kill you. So I always try to double check those. I think I know that this product's going to LAX, but it's getting delivered to this freight forwarder. But I just want to make sure, does it go to their address at corporate headquarters or does it go to the airport? I mean, they told me it goes to their address, but I'm going to double check that. Why? Because I don't want any hiccups, okay? All those little details I'm just double checking as I go because I want to make sure that I'm very clear on what's there. And the main thing that kind of trumps everything is communication. So I believe that's more important than speed. Communication with the different parties and checking in and seeing things really helps those clients. So let me give you a couple examples, scenarios. You have a client that you contracted with, and you set up all the logistics, and you say, okay, just let you know it's going to pick up on Thursday, and then you let the logistics go, and then the client calls you on Friday, and they say, well, it wasn't picked up. You're like, okay, let me call over there. So call over there. Okay, it's going to get picked up on Friday, and then the client calls you on Monday and says, you know, I haven't picked up yet. I'm really not happy about this. So you're like, okay, well, let me call and see what I can do. And so you call, and then it gets picked up, and then it goes to the airport, and you're thinking it's going all the way to the end user. Let's say they're going to France, okay, or Paris. Well, something happens at the airport, and now all of a sudden there's a couple-day delay. And so now we're looking at 4 or 5 days delay, and you didn't know about it until someone called you. So now you're having to call the client and say, you know, this is going to be 4 or 5 days late, right? Is the client happy at that point? Not normally. Now, let's take that whole scenario and let's back up a second. Let's say I'm calling the trucking company and I'm saying, hey, are you picking up at this time? Well, no, there's a delay because I'm delayed on this other pickup that I have to, this other drop-off I have to unload first. Okay, when are you going to be there? Okay, I'm going to be there at this time. So then I call the client and say, he's going to pick up at this time, right? Then, if he doesn't pick up at that time, then the client and I are already in communication, so he knows. So then if that client, if then he doesn't pick up the second day, I'm pushing back on the trucking company. I'm saying, you better get a truck over there, or we better get some concession on this freight because this is costing my client money, right? And so you kind of go through it that way, and that's why I say, you know, a little bit more communication with those parties is usually very good. Has anyone had experience with that they want to share, or some ideas on that end on the communication side? Yeah.
Had a sort of interesting little scenario recently, shipping some stuff to Canada, which I figured was going to be a piece of cake, and built in a couple extra buffer days and found out that one of the days was a Canadian national holiday. There would be no shipping on Victoria Day. I apologize if there's any Canadians here, but the customs people can be very fussy at times. And anyway, it was, I mean, it got down to the wire. We
But did you still deliver it on time?
Yes, so
Yeah.
it took a little shepherding and hand-holding, but we got it done. But I mean, it's just a good reminder to check little things like that.
Yeah.
You don't know what countries are going to have what kind of holidays.
And there's always going to be something. I mean, every once in a while, there's something you didn't think of. And so we'll talk about how to plan for that as well. But that's a great example where you create a buffer day. It ended up getting eaten up, and now it's still on time, so you meet your client expectation. That's great. Thank you. Any other examples or thoughts on implementation?
Well, I don't know if this is like implementation, but just making sure that you have all of the requested documents. I feel like a lot of our international customers will tell us at the last minute, like this random document that they need, and this last one was they need a document from the Chamber of Commerce. And we thought, okay, well, fine. I mean, it had already shipped. It was at their port. It's in their country, and they can't clear it until it has this document from the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
Well, what ended up happening is because the booths were actually manufactured in Vietnam, that we had to go to the Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam to get the letter from them of the country of origin, whatever.
Yeah.
And so that meant it was stuck there for almost 2 weeks while we had to track down like the right Chamber of Commerce, the right person to get in touch with and get this document from them. So had we known like going into it, I mean, we could have like taken care of that probably ahead of time, but I feel like that kind of stuff happens.
It does, and you brought up a good point with country of origin mapping. And if you have products with multiple countries that input into your product and then you re-export that, that's a very important process to make sure that you're mapping out where each of those parts came from, because that's going to come into play when you export. And sometimes you don't think about it because it doesn't seem like a material piece. Or it's like, man, I didn't realize that I got it from this guy, but he sourced it over here, right? And so that can be, that's something we can dive into in a little bit longer study, but it's a good point, something to think about. Yeah. All right, monitoring. So we talked about this a little bit already in the implementation section, but checking the shipping process. Are there appropriate safety, security, health measures being taken? If you have hazardous material, are the hazmat processes being taken? Do you have qualified people to check that through? Depends on the different product, what the needs are. Are the estimated arrival dates? Do you have a plan B? That's something that we don't always think about, but what's my plan B? What if this doesn't work? What am I going to do? Good question. You try to have that as much as you can. And then knowing the unique needs of your partners. I was in baking for a while, and we call this know your customer. But basically, what we try to do is to set up, hey, before we ship, we want to know what your products are, what's unique about them, what are the scenarios about those products that we might need to know, and then where are you shipping to, so we can check with those countries, like you were saying, and say, hey, what are the unique needs for those countries in shipping this product? And when you can gather all that information up front, it really does help streamline that process. And then hold your partners accountable, but be gracious. So this is one of those things. It's a relationship, and in a relationship, they need to know that there's going to be some consequences if things aren't done on time or in the right way, but at the same time are gracious, right? So I'll give you an example. We had a trucking company that was contracted through one of our logistics partners, and he didn't show up 2 days in a row. So I said, look, it's costing my client money. I want some consideration on that. It was about, $2,400 in freight. It wasn't huge, but so I asked him for $100. But I also said, hey, I think if I can get $100 and give that discount to my client, we may be able to keep the relationship with you down the road, but we need to make some changes. So that's the gracious side. So it's just working that relationship and negotiating a little bit, really not sticking it too hard, but he knows now next time when his truck is on the road, it's going to cost him something. So he's more likely to make those follow-up calls for me than if I just said, there's nothing we could have done, and I tell the client there's nothing we could have done. Clients don't usually like to hear that. So I try to figure out a way where both parties are happy, but then there's some accountability in the process. Anyone else have any examples of that they want to share? Accountability? Okay. And then follow-up. So this is a critical piece, and I'll just kind of end with this. Success is in the follow-up. So why not triage? We don't have to do every single one, but let's triage some of our logistics projects or our shipping scenarios and figure out, hey, what can we improve on, right? Where can we make adjustments? Was everybody satisfied? What didn't go according to plan? How can we adapt? And so those are those questions. If we can get to that on a fairly regular basis, then we become one of those better, best-in-class type of partnerships. And it could be you and your logistics partner and your client. It could be your logistics team and your company, whoever's involved in that process. But if we do a little triage on the back end and just say, hey, what can we improve on? What went wrong? How do we adjust? I call it adjust in advance. I mean, that's really what the best type of companies, I believe, do. Is they're not satisfied with, okay, everything seemed to go okay on that one. Well, could it have gone better? You know, what would have been better? And I think sometimes we miss that in the speed, right? So I just want to encourage you guys on that end, you know, do some of the follow-up questions and really try to figure out, hey, in this process, how can it be improved? Any thoughts or ideas on the continuous improvement side of things, the follow-up?
Is that just like internal conversations that you're having with your team, or is that kind of like a checklist, or are you reporting the data that you get back, and how is that? How do you implement that across your other projects moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was, is that something you just do with your team? Is there a checklist you can use? And maybe do you involve some of your other parties? And I will say, you know, it's kind of up to you. You can customize that, but I think those are all great ideas. Having a checklist is a really good idea. Hey, here's the things that we are rating on this deal. And then you can go back to your logistics partners and say, hey, here's your grade, or here's how we rated you on this because of the service. I think that's a great idea. I think checking with your team. I don't know if it has to be done on every deal, but it might be a weekly meeting, you know, where it's just a 15-minute meeting. Here's the 10, 20 deals that we did this week, and here's how they went. Here's what went wrong on these two. Let's figure out how we can adjust in advance, right? And so I think that's fun. And then, you know, in that process with your teams, you want to have ways to celebrate success, right? People don't always like focusing on the bad things. So figure out, hey, what's successful, and then let's have little rewards for that, or little kind of kudos that we shoot out to those folks for really doing a good job, right? That's the other side of it. But I think you also involved kind of, what was your name again?
Shannon.
Shannon. I think, Shannon, you also involve some of those partners, you know, because it's like, hey, like this gentleman with this trucker where he hired the trucker, and the trucker didn't show up 2 days in a row. And I'm like, look, you should have been calling him and making sure he was going to show up. I want him to know that, because if he doesn't know that, then when I don't give him the deal down the road, because that's happened 2 or 3 times, he might be mad at me versus understanding that he's been on the wrong side. So it's kind of helping them get there. And he may have 15, 20 clients that are totally okay with that process, and they just say, yeah, no big deal, we'll just let them know, right? Well, that's not okay with me. I want the best service. I don't want the average service. So I'm gonna kind of drive them that direction, if that makes sense. Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Other questions or thoughts?
Any metrics or anything? Do you track like OTDs and your deliverables, and then
Yep.
you look at that from an SPC standpoint?
We do actually. Our firm will use like and other firms can too. You can just use like a tracking timeline. So, you know, when was the order received? When was it picked up? But also documentation stuff. And if you put those dates in there, you can start tracking how long it takes you to do certain functions. And then that's good for 2 things. One, you can find those anomalies where it took long and then start triaging it in your meetings, right? But also it gives you a better way to explain to a client the time it takes to do some of these things. Because if you oversell and underdeliver, that's never helpful, right? So, and if it's a specific country and you find it takes longer in that country, that's really good information. So we do track that, and we try to give that information to our clients about, you know, whether it's specific countries they're dealing with. You don't have experience everywhere in the world usually, but, you know, as you get that experience, you try to pass that on. It's a great point. Yeah. Have you guys done some of that yet, or something that you're thinking about implementing?
Part of the ISO 9000 quality management system is to track that, look at metrics for all of your important factors, and then you can extrapolate that, you know, as often as you want to. And then,
Yeah.
For a CIP, for continuous improvement, you can focus on the areas that, you know, your weakest points, and then keep them up.
Yeah, I love that idea, and that's great feedback. Any other thoughts or ideas that you want to share with the group? All right. Thank you very much.